The distress signal came through like a whisper in the dark, a desperate plea from a dying world. Admiral Kira Volkov stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, humanity's most advanced warship, her gaze locked onto the holographic display. The message was garbled, fragmented, but the meaning was clear. This is the Yolani Republic. Under attack. Genocide. Please, anyone, help us. The bridge crew was silent. The Yolani were an advanced species, members of the Galactic Council, yet they had never sought alliances with humans. To them, Earth was a backwater death world, filled with violent primitives who had clawed their way into space far too quickly. The Council feared humanity, distrusted them. And yet, when war came knocking, it wasn't the Council they called. It was us. Kira turned to her tactical officer, Commander Idris. "Who's attacking them?" Idris's fingers flew across his console, pulling up sensor data. "Looks like the Zephyr Dominion, Admiral. Heavy fleet presence. Multiple dreadnoughts. They've already wiped out most Yolani defenses." A low murmur spread through the bridge. The Zephyr Dominion. A species known for conquest, enslaving or exterminating every race they encountered. They followed no treaties, no rules of war. Wherever they arrived, civilizations burned. Kira exhaled slowly, her mind working through the options. The Yolani wouldn't have called humanity unless they were out of hope. Earth had been denied a seat in the Council, refused entry into trade agreements, and branded as too aggressive. But now? Now the so-called primitives were their only hope. She turned to her comms officer. "Send a message to the fleet. We move now." A chorus of confirmations echoed across the bridge. The Vindicator wasn't alone. Behind it, the first expeditionary fleet stood ready. 30 of Earth's deadliest warships, built for one purpose: survival in an unforgiving galaxy. The Yolani had called for help. Humanity was coming. The fleet exited warp just outside Yolani space, the void lighting up as warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. The battle was already underway. The Yolani homeworld, Seraphis, burned beneath a relentless orbital bombardment. Above it, the remains of their fleet drifted, shattered hulls and debris scattering like dust. And at the center of it all, the Zephyr war fleet. "By God," whispered Lieutenant Hale, "they're butchering them." Kira's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. The Dominion fleet was massive, outnumbering humanity's forces at least 2-1. Their ships were sleek, obsidian black, bristling with plasma cannons and energy lances. They were built to dominate, to crush opposition. "Status on the Yolani survivors?" she asked. "Minimal resistance left," Idris reported grimly. "Their planetary shields are failing. If we don't act now—" "We act," Kira cut in. She stood, voice hard as steel. "Open a channel to the Dominion flagship." A few seconds later, the view screen flickered, revealing a monstrous figure. A Zephyr warlord, towering and insectoid, his armored carapace gleaming under the ship's internal lights. His mandibles clicked, his 4 eyes narrowed. "You are the humans," he sneered. "Deathworlders." Kira didn't flinch. "Admiral Kira Volkov of the United Terran Navy, you are committing genocide against a sovereign species. Cease your attack and withdraw." The warlord chittered in amusement. "Withdraw." "You misunderstand, human. This world is already dead. The Yolani are weak. They have no right to exist, and you—" He leaned forward. "Your kind should have stayed on your cursed world. You think you can challenge the Dominion?" Kira's lips curled into a smirk. "I don't think I know." She cut the feed. "All ships," she commanded. "Weapons free. Show them why the galaxy fears Deathworlders." And with that, the human fleet charged. The void of space erupted into chaos as humanity's warships surged forward, weapons blazing. Energy lances and railgun slugs tore through the blackness, slamming into the Zephyr fleet with devastating force. The Dominion ships were built for conquest, but they had never fought humans before. They had never faced the sheer brutality of Deathworlder warfare. The Vindicator led the charge, its main cannons roaring to life. Plasma bursts struck the nearest Zephyr dreadnought, melting through its hull like a hot knife through wax. Explosions rippled along its spine before it split apart, debris scattering in all directions. "Enemy ship down," Hale shouted. "Keep pushing," Kira barked. "Target their command vessels, cut off their leadership." The Zephyr weren't prepared for this. Their usual strategy was overwhelming firepower and terror tactics. But humanity? Humanity thrived in war. They had fought each other for thousands of years before ever reaching the stars. They knew how to adapt, how to win. The Dominion fleet scrambled to reorganize, their warlord realizing too late that this was no easy prey. More human ships arrived, tearing through the Zephyr lines like a pack of wolves. They struck with precision, overwhelming enemy vessels one by one. Inside the Vindicator, Kira's crew worked with deadly efficiency. Idris called out enemy movements, Hale coordinated targeting solutions, and the bridge hummed with controlled chaos. "Incoming torpedoes! Deploy countermeasures! Hostile flagship attempting to flank!" "Not on my watch," Kira muttered. "Bring the Vindicator about and charge their flagship head-on." Her crew hesitated for only a second before obeying. The massive battleship shifted course, engines flaring as it barreled straight toward the enemy command ship. The Zephyr warlord, watching from his bridge, finally realized his mistake. He had underestimated humanity. The Vindicator unleashed a full salvo. Railgun slugs the size of cars slammed into the Zephyr flagship, ripping through its shields. Its hull buckled under the assault, sections venting atmosphere as fires spread across its decks. The warlord bellowed in rage, his mandibles clicking furiously, but his fleet was crumbling around him. And then, the Yolani made their move. What few warships remained of their once proud navy had been hiding, waiting, watching. Seeing humanity fight, seeing the Deathworlders take the fight to the enemy, had reignited something in them. A final stand. The remaining Yolani vessels surged forward, joining the human fleet. They weren't built for war like the Terrans, but desperation made them dangerous. They rammed into Zephyr cruisers, overloaded their reactors to cause massive explosions, and fought with the fury of a species on the edge of extinction. For the first time in its history, the Dominion fleet broke. The warlord's voice screeched across open comms. "Retreat! Fall back! The humans are—" His transmission cut off as the Vindicator fired its main cannon directly into his bridge. The Zephyr flagship detonated in a blinding fireball, pieces of its hull scattering into the void. Silence followed. The once invincible Dominion fleet was in full retreat. The battlefield, once filled with slaughter, was now eerily quiet. Kira exhaled, gripping the armrest of her chair. "Status report?" Idris scanned his console. "Zephyr forces retreating. Casualties heavy, but we held the line, Admiral." A message flickered onto the comms display. A transmission from the Yolani leadership. Their Prime Minister, battered and bloodied but alive, appeared on the screen. His eyes, once filled with disdain for humans, were now brimming with something else. Respect. "You came when no one else would," he said, voice shaking. "You saved our people." Kira leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Remember that." She cut the transmission. Humanity had answered the call for help, and the galaxy would never forget. The battlefield was quiet now, but the weight of what had just happened still pressed down on the bridge of the Vindicator. The Zephyr fleet, the unstoppable conquerors of the galaxy, had been driven into retreat by humans, by Deathworlders. Kira stood, staring at the debris-strewn void. Wreckage drifted in slow, eerie silence, pieces of Zephyr hull plating and Yolani ships floating aimlessly. Fires still burned in the atmosphere of Seraphis, the Yolani homeworld. They had won, but at what cost? She turned to Idris. Casualty report? His fingers tapped rapidly on the console, pulling up the grim statistics. We lost 7 ships, hundreds dead, thousands injured. The Yolani... He hesitated. They were nearly wiped out. Civilian casualties in the millions. Their military is gone. What's left of their government is asking for immediate assistance. Kira exhaled sharply. Of course they are. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Yolani, who had spent decades looking down on humans, who had refused them a place in the Galactic Council, now begged for help. Lieutenant Hale spoke up from the comms station. Incoming message from Fleet Command, Admiral. They want an update. Kira nodded. Patch them through. The main view screen flickered, and the stern face of Admiral Jameson, Supreme Commander of the United Terran Navy, appeared. His sharp blue eyes took in the scene behind Kira, the smoldering battlefield, the distant planet still in crisis. Kira, Jameson said, his voice measured. I see your fight was a success. Yes, sir, she replied. The Zephyr have been driven out. The Yolani survived barely. They're asking for aid. Jameson was silent for a moment, considering. Then he leaned forward, his face hard. Are they asking for aid, or are they asking for protection? Kira understood what he was getting at. The Yolani hadn't just been attacked. They had been conquered. And if humanity walked away now, the Zephyr would come back, more prepared, more ruthless. The only way to ensure the Yolani survived was to place them under Earth's protection. It was an opportunity. The same Galactic Council that had rejected humanity would now be forced to acknowledge their power. They'll want a full military occupation, Kira said carefully. They won't say it outright, but they know they have no choice. Jameson nodded. Then make it happen. Deploy ground teams, secure their capital, and inform the Yolani government that they are now under the Terran Defense Initiative. Kira felt a small smirk tug at her lips. The same Yolani who had once called humans barbarians would now live under the protection of those very same barbarians. Understood, sir. Jameson gave her one last firm nod before the transmission cut out. Hours later, the first Terran warships descended into the atmosphere of Seraphis. Dropships roared through the smoke-filled sky, deploying squads of Terran Marines onto the devastated streets. The Yolani people watched from the ruins of their city, their wide, luminous eyes filled with uncertainty. Some looked grateful, others resentful. Kira landed with the first wave of ground forces, stepping out of the dropship in full military uniform. Yolani officials hurried forward, their leader, a thin, gray-skinned male named Prime Minister Veyron, bowing his head slightly. Admiral Volkov, he said, his voice strained. Your arrival is appreciated. Kira didn't bother with formalities. The Dominion will return. You know that. If you want your species to survive, you'll need us here. Veyron hesitated, his hands clasping and unclasping nervously. We understand, and we will do what is necessary to ensure our people's survival. Kira's gaze was cold. Then say it. Silence stretched between them. Around them, Yolani citizens whispered amongst themselves, watching as human soldiers secured the streets. They had called for help, and help had come. But now the consequences were clear. Veyron swallowed hard, then spoke the words that changed everything. The Yolani Republic formally requests to come under the protection of the United Terran Navy. Kira nodded, sealing the fate of an entire species. Then welcome to the Terran Defense Initiative. The era of human dominance in the galaxy had begun. The Yolani homeworld, Seraphis, was officially under Terran protection. The banners of the United Terran Navy flew alongside Yolani sigils, a silent declaration of what had happened. Humanity had answered their distress call. Now, humanity would decide their future. Admiral Kira Volkov stood at the edge of the Yolani capital, watching as Terran soldiers moved through the streets. They weren't conquerors, but they weren't just saviors either. They were occupiers, no matter how politely it was framed. The Yolani, once a proud and independent species, were now under the watchful eye of a species they had dismissed as savages. Kira turned as Commander Idris approached. "We've begun setting up defensive perimeters around key infrastructure," he reported. "Local resistance is minimal. Most of them are too shell-shocked to fight back." She nodded. "And the ones who aren't?" Idris hesitated. "There's tension, Admiral. Some of the Yolani don't want us here. There have been incidents. Graffiti on our vehicles. Reports of Yolani refusing to cooperate. No direct violence yet, but it's a matter of time." Kira wasn't surprised. It was one thing to beg for help when you were desperate. It was another to live with the price of that help. "Keep the soldiers on alert," she said. "We're here to protect them, not to rule them. But if they push us, they'll learn why humans survived on a death world." Idris gave a tight nod and walked off, leaving Kira to her thoughts. Just then, Lieutenant Hale's voice crackled through her comm. "Admiral, we've got something on long-range sensors. You'll want to see this." Back aboard the Vindicator, Kira strode onto the bridge, eyes locked onto the holographic display. The sensor feed showed a massive energy signature approaching the system, larger than anything they'd seen before. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," Kira muttered. Hale's expression was grim. "It's a Zethar armada." The room tensed. The Zethar hadn't just retreated to lick their wounds. They had gone to regroup, to bring reinforcements. Now they were coming back, with a fleet nearly triple the size of the one humanity had just defeated. "How long until they reach Seraphis?" Kira asked. Idris checked the data. 17 hours, maybe 18 if we're lucky. 18 hours. That was all the time they had before annihilation came knocking. Kira clenched her jaw. "Send an emergency message to Fleet Command. We need reinforcements now." Hale's fingers flew over the console, transmitting the distress call. But Kira already knew the truth. Terran reinforcements were days away. The first expeditionary fleet was the only force in this sector, which meant that for the next 18 hours, they were on their own. The bridge was silent, everyone waiting for her orders. Finally, Kira spoke. "Prepare for battle." If the Zethir thought humanity would break, they had another thing coming. This wasn't over. This had just begun. The countdown had begun. 18 hours. That was all the time humanity had to prepare before the Zethir armada arrived to wipe them out. Kira Volkov stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, her mind working through the impossible situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned. The Yolani were in no condition to fight. Their fleet shattered, their defenses burned to ash. The nearest Terran reinforcements were days away. And yet, surrender was not an option. "We make our stand here," Kira said, her voice like steel. "If the Zethir want this planet, they'll have to take it over our dead bodies." She turned to her officers. "Idris, give me a full tactical breakdown. What do we have left?" Idris pulled up a holographic display of their fleet. "We have 23 warships still operational. Damage across the board, but functional. The planetary defenses are in ruins, but we've started deploying surface-to-orbit missile platforms with Yolani assistance. It won't be enough to stop an armada, but it'll slow them down." Kira nodded. And ground forces? 4,000 Marines deployed across key locations. Another 2,000 Yolani volunteers, but they're barely trained. Idris hesitated. Truth be told, Admiral, it's not enough. It never was. Kira turned to Hale. Any word from Fleet Command? Hale shook his head. They received our distress call. The Second Fleet is mobilizing, but even at emergency speeds, they won't reach us for at least 72 hours. 72 hours. They only had 18. Kira clenched her fists. No help was coming. This fight would be won or lost here. She exhaled sharply. Then we'll make them regret coming back. I want every ship in the fleet repositioned into a defensive formation around Seraphis. We can't win an open battle, but we can make them bleed for every inch they take. Idris nodded grimly. A death trap. Exactly, Kira said. We use the planet's gravity well to our advantage. Force them into choke points. We strike hard, fast, then fall back. Hit and run until we grind them down. Hale hesitated. And if that's not enough? Kira's expression darkened. Then we make sure the Zethir pay so much for this world that they never come back. The preparations moved fast. Across the Yolani capital, Terran Marines worked side by side with desperate Yolani civilians, reinforcing defensive positions, setting up makeshift barricades, and preparing for the inevitable slaughter. Kira walked through the city streets, her boots crunching against shattered glass. The devastation from the first Zethir attack was everywhere. Collapsed buildings, smoldering ruins, bodies buried under rubble. She spotted a group of Yolani standing near an old government complex. One of them, a young male barely out of adolescence, clutched a plasma rifle in shaking hands. You ever used that before? Kira asked. The Yolani boy stiffened. No, but I will if I have to. She studied him. There was fear in his wide, luminous eyes, but beneath that, anger, hatred. The Zethir had taken everything from him. Good, Kira said, because tomorrow we send those bastards back to hell. The Yolani boy nodded. The humans and the Yolani weren't friends, but now they were something else, allies in survival. As the final hours ticked away, Kira stood aboard the Vindicator, watching the stars. The Zethir armada would be here soon. Thousands of ships, millions of warriors. She tapped her comms. All hands, prepare for combat. This is it. Her officers acknowledged her. Across the fleet, weapons primed, missile bays locked, engines burned hot. The void of space trembled as the Zethir arrived. A massive, dark armada emerged from warp, stretching across the horizon like an unstoppable tide. Dreadnoughts, battleships, swarms of fighter craft. The Dominion had returned, and this time they weren't here to conquer. They were here to exterminate. The lead warship broadcasted a message across all channels. A familiar voice echoed through the Vindicator's bridge. You should have left when you had the chance, humans, the Zethir warlord sneered. Now, you will die alongside the weaklings you tried to protect. Kira smirked, eyes gleaming with defiance. Then come and kill us, she said. The battle for Seraphis had begun. The void of space erupted into chaos. The Zethir armada descended upon Seraphis like a wave of death, their ships blotting out the stars as they unleashed a storm of plasma and kinetic fire. The United Terran Navy, battered but unbroken, answered with everything they had. From the bridge of the Vindicator, Admiral Kira Volkov stood like a statue, watching the battle unfold. 23 human warships stood against an enemy force more than triple their size. But numbers had never won wars. Strategy did. Hold the line, she barked. Stick to the gravity well maneuver. We make them bleed for every step forward. The fleet moved, executing Kira's battle plan with terrifying precision. They didn't fight the Zephyr head-on. That would have been suicide. Instead, they lured them in, using Seraphis's gravity well to force them into tight formations, into bottlenecks where human ships could focus fire. The first wave of Zephyr ships fell fast. Railgun slugs the size of small cars tore through their hulls. Plasma lances cut through their armor like molten knives. Explosions rippled across the enemy formation as human warships fought like demons. Aboard the Vindicator, Idris called out enemy movements. Multiple dreadnoughts pushing the left flank. They're trying to break through. Kira's mind raced. If the Zephyr broke past the fleet, they'd reach Seraphis, and the ground forces wouldn't stand a chance. "Bring the Hammerfall and Resolute around to intercept," she ordered. "Pin them down with overlapping fields of fire." 2 Terran battleships adjusted course, their engines roaring as they cut off the Zephyr advance. Within seconds, they were trading fire, blinding explosions flaring between them. The Zephyr were learning. They had expected a slaughter, but what they found was resistance like nothing they had ever seen. One of the enemy dreadnoughts tried to break past the trap, and paid for it. The Hammerfall unleashed its full broadside. A barrage of kinetic rounds impacted the Zephyr warship, tearing through its hull with horrifying force. The enemy vessel's shields collapsed, and a final torpedo barrage from the Resolute split it in half. The Zephyr ship exploded, debris scattering in all directions. The bridge cheered, but Kira wasn't celebrating yet, because the real battle was about to begin. The second wave came harder. The Zephyr adjusted their tactics, pushing in multiple directions at once. They sent suicide squadrons, dozens of smaller ships crashing into Terran formations, forcing them to reposition. The humans were winning, but the Zephyr had the numbers. And slowly, inch by inch, the enemy pushed forward. Kira clenched her fists. They weren't going to hold forever. Her comm buzzed. "Admiral," Idris said, voice tight. "Enemy ground forces incoming." Her blood turned to ice. On Seraphis, the sky burned as Zephyr dropships rained from orbit like falling stars. On the ground, Terran Marines and Yolani resistance fighters braced for the incoming assault. The makeshift barricades, the fortifications, they all felt small now, against the sheer unstoppable force of the Zephyr war machine. Sergeant Daniel Briggs, leading one of the forward defenses, watched as the first wave of Zephyr warriors hit the ground running. "Here they come," someone shouted. The Zephyr weren't just an advanced species. They were monsters, 8 feet tall, armor-plated with razor-sharp mandibles and organic weaponry fused to their bodies. They didn't just fight. They devoured. "Hold the line," Briggs roared. The Zephyr charged. Human rifles opened up, unleashing hell. Railgun rounds and plasma bursts ripped into the alien ranks, tearing through their chitinous exoskeletons. The first wave fell, but more kept coming. A Zephyr warrior leapt over the barricade, landing right on top of Briggs. The sergeant barely had time to react before the monster's clawed hand lashed out, slicing through his armor. He grunted in pain but didn't fall. Instead, he shoved his pistol under the Zephyr's jaw and pulled the trigger. The alien's head exploded, and Briggs kicked the corpse off him. "Push them back!" he roared. The battle for the ground had begun. Back aboard the Vindicator, Kira watched the Zephyr landings with cold fury. "We need to hold them off until reinforcements arrive," Idris said. Kira narrowed her eyes. "Then we change the rules of the battle." Hale looked up. "Admiral," Kira's voice was calm, deadly. "We take the fight to their flagship." Silence. Idris blinked. "You want to go after the Zephyr warlord directly?" "We don't win this by outlasting them," Kira said. "We cut off the head. No warlord, no battle plan. Their forces will collapse." Hale swallowed. "That's a suicide mission." Kira smirked. "Not if we do it right." She turned to her crew. "Prepare a strike team. We're boarding that flagship." The humans had one last card to play, and they were about to go all in. The plan was madness. Kira knew that. The entire bridge crew knew that. But if they didn't do something bold, something reckless, they would all be dead in a matter of hours. The Zephyr outnumbered them. They were pushing through. The ground forces were barely holding the city. And if the battle kept going the way it was, Seraphis would fall before reinforcements arrived. So Kira did the only thing that made sense. She decided to kill the Zephyr warlord herself. "Idris," she ordered, "get me a strike team. Our best fighters. We're boarding that flagship." Her second-in-command hesitated only for a second before giving a sharp nod. "Understood, Admiral." Hale turned in his seat, eyes wide. "Ma'am, you cannot be serious." "I've never been more serious," Kira cut in. "That warlord is the brain of their invasion. If we kill him, the Zephyr forces will fracture. We've seen it happen before. They don't function well without centralized leadership. If we remove him, we buy ourselves the time we need." Hale clenched his jaw, but he knew better than to argue. "Understood," he said. Within minutes, a strike team of elite Terran Marines assembled in the Vindicator's hangar. They were the best of the best, veterans who had fought and survived humanity's worst wars. They wore enhanced combat armor, their weapons primed for close-quarters annihilation. Kira walked into the hangar, fully geared up. A modified railgun rifle was strapped to her back, a plasma sidearm at her hip. She wasn't about to send soldiers into hell without leading them herself. Sergeant Briggs, bloody but alive from the ground battle, saluted her. "Didn't think you'd be crazy enough to come down here, Admiral," he said. Kira smirked. "If I wasn't crazy, I wouldn't be human." Briggs chuckled. "Fair enough." The dropship was ready. The plan was simple. Punch a hole through the battle, land on the enemy flagship, and take out the warlord. The only problem? That flagship was surrounded by 1,000 enemy ships. The Vindicator led the suicide run. The entire Terran fleet shifted its focus, blasting a temporary gap in the Zephyr formation. The dropship launched, streaking through the chaos, weaving through explosions and laser fire. Inside, the Marines gripped their weapons, ready for the worst fight of their lives. "10 seconds to breach," the pilot called. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, a massive black fortress, covered in spiked armor glowing red from the energy coursing through it. The home of the warlord. The dropship dodged incoming fire, then slammed into the hull of the enemy vessel. Impact. The doors burst open, and the Marines stormed out, weapons blazing. The Zephyr guards reacted immediately, their monstrous forms rushing to intercept. Close-quarters combat, the most brutal kind. The corridor erupted into pure carnage. Kira fired her railgun, blasting a hole clean through a Zephyr's chest. Blood sprayed against the walls, but she was already moving forward, dodging a clawed strike from another warrior. Briggs unloaded his shotgun into a Zephyr's face at point-blank range, splattering the walls with alien gore. The fight was savage, merciless, but the Marines kept pushing. They had one goal: find the warlord, kill him, end the invasion. They stormed through the flagship, gunning down anything that moved. The deeper they went, the more resistance they faced. Finally, they reached a set of massive doors, reinforced with Zephyr biotechnology. "This is it," Kira said. She pulled a thermal charge from her belt, slapped it onto the door, and detonated it. Boom! The doors blew inward, revealing a vast, throne-like chamber. And there, standing at the center of the room, was the Zephyr warlord. He was a monster, even larger than the others, his exoskeleton plated with golden armor, his 4 burning eyes locked onto the humans with pure hatred. "You dare step into my domain!" His voice rumbled through the chamber. Kira raised her rifle. "Damn right we do." The final battle had begun. The Zephyr warlord stood at the far end of the throne chamber, his golden-plated exoskeleton gleaming under the eerie red lights. The chamber itself pulsed like a living organism, the walls lined with Zephyr biotechnology, dark, chitinous structures that oozed with energy. His 4 burning eyes locked onto Kira and her strike team. "You should have fled, Deathworlders," he hissed, his voice like grinding stone. "You are nothing, insects playing at war." Kira smirked, raising her rifle. "Funny, we just tore through your ship like it was made of paper. And now, we're here to kill you." The warlord laughed, a deep clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. Around him, dozens of Zephyr warriors emerged from the walls, their organic weapons glowing with energy. "You will try," the warlord said. Then he roared, a sound so powerful it shook the walls. And the fight began. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Zephyr warriors charged, their massive clawed limbs striking out at the Marines. The first 2 humans went down instantly, their bodies ripped apart before they could even scream. Kira rolled aside, raising her railgun. She fired, the massive slug punching through a Zephyr's skull, sending it collapsing to the floor. Briggs fought like a demon, unloading his shotgun into a Zephyr's chest, then drawing his combat knife and ramming it into another's throat. The Marines fought hard, but the Zephyr were relentless. "We can't hold," someone yelled. Kira gritted her teeth. They didn't have time for a prolonged fight. The longer this took, the more Marines they would lose. The warlord stood at the back, watching, waiting for them to weaken before he stepped in. Kira made a split-second decision. "Briggs, cover me!" She broke into a sprint, weaving through the chaos, dodging slicing claws and whipping energy blades. Her armor screeched as an enemy strike grazed her shoulder, but she kept moving. The warlord saw her coming, and he moved to meet her. They clashed in the center of the chamber. The warlord swung a massive blade, its organic metal edge glowing with superheated plasma. Kira ducked just in time, feeling the heat sear past her head. She fired point blank, but the warlord's armor absorbed the hit. He backhanded her, the force sending her flying into a pillar. Pain exploded through her body, but she wasn't done. The warlord stalked forward, towering over her. "You think you can kill me, human?" he sneered. Kira coughed up blood and grinned through bloody teeth. "Yeah," she said, "because we Deathworlders don't go down easy." She pulled the pin on a plasma grenade and jammed it straight into his chest armor. The warlord's eyes widened in shock. Boom! The explosion ripped through him, sending chunks of exoskeleton and burning flesh flying in all directions. For a second, there was only silence. Then the remaining Zephyr warriors screeched in panic. Their leader was dead. And the one thing humanity had learned about the Zephyr was that without leadership, they fell apart. The Zephyr forces broke. And the Marines? They finished the job. Back aboard the Vindicator, the Zephyr fleet began to collapse. Their flagship, now leaderless, drifted aimlessly. Across the battlefield, the once organized Dominion forces crumbled, their coordinated attacks turning into panic. The Terran fleet pushed forward, tearing through the remaining Zephyr ships like a pack of wolves, ripping apart a wounded beast. Minutes later, the remaining Zephyr forces fled, abandoning the battle. Humanity had won. The war for Seraphis was over. Hours later, Kira stood in the ruins of the Yalani capital. Around her, Terran Marines walked among the survivors, offering medical aid. The Yalani, once too proud to accept humanity as equals, now looked at them with something new. Reverence, respect. Prime Minister Veyrin approached, his expression unreadable. "You saved us," he said. Kira nodded. "Yeah? We did. Veyrin hesitated. Then, for the first time, he bowed his head. The Yelani Republic will never forget what your people have done for us, he said. And from this day forward, we will stand with humanity. A new alliance had been born, and as Kira looked up at the burned sky, she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had just learned a very important lesson. Never underestimate a Deathworlder. For centuries, the Galactic community had laughed at Earth, a backwater planet filled with fragile, primitive creatures who barely understood space travel. The Council of Dominion, a ruling body of the most powerful empires, didn't even bother acknowledging Earth as a real civilization. They were weak. They were unimportant. They were nothing. At least, that's what the galaxy believed. Then the Zarkari Empire made a mistake. A species known for its brutal conquest, the Zarkari had crushed hundreds of worlds, leaving only smoldering ruins and enslaved survivors in their wake. Their six-limbed war beasts, standing twice the size of the average human, were bred for one purpose: destruction. Their fleets darkened the skies of entire planets, wiping out resistance in days. So when they turned their hungry eyes toward Earth, the Council barely reacted. "Let them take it," the Corvin ambassador had scoffed. "Humans are nothing but hairless apes. If the Zarkari want to waste their resources, let them." It was meant to be an easy invasion, a mere formality before another banner was raised under the Zarkari Empire. But the moment the first Zarkari ships entered the Sol system, something went wrong. The Zarkari command vessel, the unyielding Wrath, led the charge. Massive, bristling with weapons, and surrounded by a fleet of destroyers, it should have been an unstoppable force. Their warriors readied themselves for the slaughter, their tusks polished, their claws sharpened. They were prepared for battle. But they weren't prepared for what happened next. Within seconds of their arrival, a single transmission was sent to the Zarkari fleet. No human warships had even launched yet. No defenses had fired. The message was simple. "Turn around. You do not understand what you are about to awaken." The Zarkari commander scoffed. Arrogance was in their blood. They responded with their own message, filled with mockery and threats. Then they heard the laughter. It was human laughter, but something about it was wrong. Distorted. Layered. It came through their communication systems, even after they cut the line. It echoed inside their helmets, inside their ships, crawling under their exoskeletons like an infection. Their translator systems tried to analyze it, failed, tried again. The laughter twisted, deepened, and the words that followed weren't in any known human language. The sound came from everywhere, and then, one by one, systems began shutting down. The Zarkari scrambled to reboot controls. But every time they restored a function, another failed. Weapon systems were the first to go, shields next, and then the lights. Total darkness fell over the unyielding Wrath. Only the emergency crimson glow remained, bathing the towering war beasts in eerie light. The Zarkari warriors, undefeated in battle, now felt something alien to them. Fear. Then came the whispering. At first they thought it was just their own crew. But the voices came from inside their helmets, speaking in their own language, words that made no sense, words that twisted their very thoughts. One warrior screamed, tore off his helmet. Another fell to his knees, clawing at his own eyes, shrieking about the ones that live in the dark. No one understood what he meant. The ship's sensors flickered back online for only a moment, long enough to detect something moving. Not ships, not missiles, something else, something impossible. They were inside the ship. The Zarkari had never seen a human yet. They had expected resistance, expected weapons, expected desperate screams for mercy. They had not expected this. The invasion had not yet begun, and already the Zarkari were losing. Panic spread like wildfire through the unyielding wrath. The Zarkari were warriors, conquerors, creatures forged in the fires of endless war. They had crushed entire civilizations without a second thought. Yet now, in the depths of their own flagship, they trembled. The whispers slithered through their helmets, through their armor, through their very minds. Words that made no sense. Words that felt wrong. They are watching. You should have turned back. Now it's too late. The ship's commander, Overlord Garen, slammed his clawed fist onto the control panel, trying to re-establish order. Enough of this, he roared. Get the lights back on. Find the source of these signals and shut them down. His engineers scrambled to obey, but every system they tried to restore flickered and died. As if something was inside the ship, tearing it apart from the inside out. The transmission from Earth came again. This time it wasn't a warning. It was a question. Do you know what your predecessors did? The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Predecessors? What predecessors? The Zarkari had never encountered humans before. As far as they knew, Earth was a new target, an easy conquest. Overlord Garen sneered and barked back a response. We do not care. Your species will kneel before us or burn. The laughter returned. But this time, it wasn't just distorted audio. This time, the laughter came from behind them. One of the bridge officers turned, his mandibles clicking nervously. His eyes widened. His entire body froze in place. Oh, Overlord! Garen spun around. There was something standing at the back of the bridge. Not human. Not alien. A shadow. A thing with no face. Yet it felt like it was grinning. It towered over them, stretching unnaturally tall, its form flickering like static on a broken screen. The bridge officers grabbed their weapons and fired. Plasma rounds sliced through the air, passed right through the figure, and impacted the walls behind it. The shadow didn't react. Then it took a step forward. The nearest officer dropped his weapon and fell to the ground, convulsing. His eyes rolled back, his breathing slowed. Then, without a sound, he stopped moving. Dead. Garen felt his instincts scream at him to run. But he was a Zarkari warlord. He did not run. With a snarl, he barked orders. Get me a boarding crew. If these humans have some kind of psionic trick, we'll rip their skulls from their... The ship tilted. Not because of a weapon strike. Not because of an external force. But because something was pulling them. Overlord! One of the engineers shrieked. We're moving toward Earth's surface. Our thrusters aren't responding. Garen slammed his claws onto the control panel. Fire the reverse boosters. We can't. Everything is offline. The ship accelerated. Through the massive viewport, Earth loomed larger and larger, its blue surface now glowing with a strange, eerie light. And in orbit, just outside the planet's atmosphere, there were wrecks. Hundreds of them. Zarkari warships, Dominion vessels, remnants of fleets long thought missing, silent, abandoned husks floating in eternal orbit around Earth like a graveyard. Garen's eyes widened, his mandibles twitched. The realization finally dawned. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to invade Earth, and no one had ever returned. Then, just as the ship's hull began to tremble from atmospheric entry, the whispers returned one last time. You were warned. The ship plummeted, and Earth finally opened its jaws. The Zarkari warships screamed through Earth's atmosphere, their hulls burning as they fought against the invisible force dragging them down. The unyielding wrath, once a symbol of unstoppable conquest, now plummeted like a wounded beast. Alarms shrieked across the ship. Warriors clung to anything they could find as the world outside spun in a blur of fire and chaos. Overlord Garen roared above the noise. Brace for impact! Then everything shattered. The flagship slammed into the surface, metal shrieking as it carved a mile-long trench into the earth. Smoke and flame rose from the wreckage, the once mighty vessel now nothing more than a broken husk. Smaller Zarkari ships crashed around it, some detonating on impact, others vanishing mid-air as if they had simply ceased to exist. Yet, despite the devastation, Garen was still alive. Pain racked his body as he pulled himself from the debris. His vision blurred, his ears rang. Around him, Zarkari warriors groaned and stumbled from the wreckage, some barely clinging to life, others crushed beneath the ruined metal. But something was wrong. It wasn't just the crash. It was the silence. There was no resistance waiting for them, no human army surrounding the wreck, no aircraft bombing their position, no sign that Earth's defenders even acknowledged their arrival. And yet, the air felt heavy, like something was watching. Garen staggered forward, his claws digging into the dirt. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Overlord Garen. We have crashed, but we are still operational, requesting immediate extraction." Static. He tried again. "Command, respond." Only the same sound came back, but buried within the static, deep and distant, was breathing. Slow, measured, listening. Then, a voice. "You should not have come here." Garen's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't human. It wasn't Zarkari. It was something else. Then one of his warriors screamed. Garen spun toward the sound. A soldier, massive and battle-hardened, had collapsed to his knees. His armor, built to withstand the harshest conditions in the galaxy, was melting. No, rotting. His exoskeleton beneath it decayed in real time, flesh sloughing from bone, mandibles disintegrating into black dust. And then he was gone. Not dead. Not even a corpse remaining. Just gone. The other Zarkari recoiled, their warrior instincts warring with something primal inside them. Fear. What is this?" one of them snarled. Then they heard the footsteps. Not human, not alien, just footsteps coming from the wreckage, from the shadows, from nowhere and everywhere at once. Then came the laughter. The same laughter from the ship. Warped, endless, wrong. Shapes moved in the darkness, and for the first time in his life, Overlord Garen felt true terror because he finally understood. This planet was not weak. It was never weak. It was a trap. And they had walked straight into it. The Zarkari, the galaxy's most feared conquerors, had never known a true enemy. They had faced resistance before, but resistance was predictable. Soldiers, weapons, defenses, nothing they couldn't crush. But this was something else. Overlord Garen stood frozen, his claws twitching over the handle of his plasma blade. Around him, his warriors fanned out, weapons raised, scanning the smoke-filled battlefield. Wreckage littered the ground, fires flickered against the night sky, and the air was thick with the scent of burning metal. But there were no human soldiers, no incoming airstrikes, just shadows and whispers. "You are not the first." The voice slithered through the comms, the air inside their heads. Some warriors ripped their helmets off, desperate to escape the sound. But there was no escape. A soldier beside Garen twitched. He staggered, dropping his rifle, claws digging into his own skull as his breathing turned ragged. His mandibles clicked erratically, eyes unfocused. "Overlord," the warrior rasped. "I hear them! Inside! His body convulsed. Then, without warning, his head snapped backward at an impossible angle. A sickening crunch echoed through the battlefield. He dropped, lifeless. Garen's throat tightened. "Spread out! Stay alert!" The remaining warriors obeyed, forming defensive positions around the wreckage. Their plasma rifles glowed in the darkness, scanning for any sign of movement. Then, one of them fired. A bright bolt of energy streaked into the smoke. The impact lit up the battlefield for a fraction of a second, revealing nothing. No enemy. No figure. But the soldier who fired? His body jerked violently. He was yanked backward, dragged into the shadows by an unseen force. His screams lasted only a heartbeat before being silenced. The warriors panicked. They fired into the darkness, plasma bolts scorching the landscape, but hitting nothing. The air thickened. The ground beneath them felt wrong, as if they weren't standing on solid terrain anymore, but something alive. Then the ground moved. It rippled beneath their feet, pulsating like the flesh of some massive, unseen beast. The air filled with a deep, rhythmic sound, not a growl, not a roar, but breathing, something old, something massive, something watching them. Garen's mind raced. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a graveyard. "You were warned," the voice whispered again. Garen gritted his fangs. "What are you?" he roared into the comms. Silence. Then, finally, a response. "We were here before you. Before your kind, before the council, before the stars themselves. And yet you came, as they always do." Garen's blood ran cold. They had thought Earth was just another primitive world. But this planet, it wasn't just defended. It was alive, and it remembered. A warrior near Garen suddenly screamed. He turned just in time to see the soldier's body twisting, his exoskeleton warping, melting, as his form stretched into something unnatural. His limbs elongated, his mandibles cracked apart, his eyes turned completely black. Then, in a single, jerky motion, he stood up again. But it was no longer him. It turned its head toward Garen, and when it smiled, he knew. They had never been fighting humans. They had been fighting Earth itself. And Earth had already won. Goran staggered back, his warrior instincts screaming at him to run, to fight, to do something. But how did one fight a planet? How did one conquer something that became its enemy? The soldier who had just transformed, his former comrade, took a step forward, his movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. His mandibles twisted into something that shouldn't have been a smile, and his voice, when it came, was layered. A distortion of his original tone, mixed with others, many others. "You hear them, don't you?" The thing that had once been a warrior whispered. More screams erupted around them. The Zarkari forces, hardened killers who had conquered countless worlds, were being picked off one by one. Some were dragged into the shadows. Others simply changed. Their bodies twisted, their minds taken, their voices merging into the ever-growing chorus of whispers. Garen's mind raced. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of advanced human weapon. Psionics, mind warfare, hallucinations. It had to be, but the planet itself pulsed beneath his feet. The air thickened with unseen eyes. The sky itself seemed to darken despite the fires. No, this was no human trick. This was something older, something waiting. A sharp click echoed behind him. Garen spun, his plasma blade igniting in a flash of blue light. One of his warriors, a veteran, a survivor of 100 campaigns, stood before him, trembling. His rifle was raised, but not at an enemy. At him. "Overlord!" the soldier gasped, his breath ragged, his body shaking violently. I hear them inside." With a sudden, brutal movement, the warrior jammed the barrel of his rifle beneath his own jaw and pulled the trigger. A flash of green plasma, a sickening hiss. His body crumpled, and the whispers grew louder. Garen's breathing turned shallow. He had to regroup, had to do something. His eyes darted across the battlefield, searching for survivors. Most of his forces were already gone, taken, consumed, or worse. But a handful of warriors still clung to their training, forming a defensive perimeter around the wreckage of the unyielding wrath. He sprinted toward them. "Fall back to the ship!" he roared. "We make our stand there!" The remaining warriors obeyed, retreating toward the shattered hull of their once mighty flagship. They weren't thinking about victory anymore, only survival. But as they reached the wreckage, a terrible realization settled over them. The ship was changing. Its metal hull, once a proud display of Zarkari engineering, was warping, twisting, pulsing like living flesh. Strange veins ran along its surface, dark and pulsing, as if the planet itself was consuming it. One of the warriors hesitated. "Overlord, the ship..." A wet tearing sound cut him off. Something emerged from the wreckage. It had no name, no true form. It was the ship. It was the battlefield. It was Earth, and it had no intention of letting them leave. Garen finally understood. They had been so arrogant. They had thought Earth was weak. But the reason no one had ever conquered this world wasn't because it lacked defenses. It was because it didn't need them. This planet did not surrender. This planet did not bow. This planet fed. And now the Zarkari would become part of it, forever. Garen's claws tightened around his plasma blade, but deep down, he knew. It wouldn't make a difference. Nothing would. This planet had already won. The thing emerging from the wreckage was unlike anything he had ever seen. A mass of shifting, writhing material, part metal, part flesh, part something else. The remains of the unyielding wrath twisted into it, folding and reshaping like a ship being devoured from the inside. No, not devoured. Transformed. And then it opened its eyes, thousands of them. Black, empty voids staring in every direction at once. A terrible, crawling realization slithered down Garen's spine. The ship wasn't being consumed. It was becoming part of Earth. A low, sickening voice rumbled from the entity, not a voice in the way beings spoke. No sound, no vibration. It was something deeper, something that spoke inside him. "We remember you." The Zarkari warriors recoiled. One of them screamed, unleashing a wild barrage of plasma fire at the shifting horror. The bolts of energy struck the mass, burning holes in it, only for the wounds to breathe and close. And then, the warrior who fired the shots gasped. His plasma rifle melted in his hands. His armor tightened against his exoskeleton. He looked down. His body was fusing into itself. He tried to scream, but his mouth sealed shut. His limbs bent at impossible angles, his form curling inward, shrinking, until he was no longer a soldier at all, just a lump of something writhing, shifting, changing. Then he was gone, and the thing with 1,000 eyes laughed. Garen turned to his remaining warriors. "We're leaving, now." "But Overlord..." "Now!" He activated the emergency beacon on his wrist. There were still Zarkari ships in orbit. He didn't know if they had received his distress signal, but he didn't care. He refused to die here. He refused to become part of whatever this was. The surviving Zarkari sprinted toward the edge of the battlefield, their massive forms cutting through the smoke and wreckage. The whispers followed them. The air pulled at them. "You were warned." One of the warriors suddenly vanished mid-stride, one moment running beside Garen, the next moment gone, as if he had never been there at all. No scream, no sound, just erasure. Garen didn't stop. He could see it now, the wreck of a landing craft half buried in the dirt. If they could get it airborne, just for a moment, they could escape. He reached it first, slamming his clawed hands against the hatch. "Get inside!" The surviving warriors clambered into the ship, their breathing ragged, their minds breaking. Garen followed last, slamming his fist against the control panel. The engines flickered, then sputtered, then died. A long, slow sigh filled the air around them. Not from a creature, not from a being, from Earth itself. The sky above darkened further, the stars vanishing one by one. And then something moved. Not in the wreckage, not in the shadows. But beneath the planet's surface, something ancient, something vast, something waking up. Garen gritted his fangs. He would not die here. With a roar, he ripped the emergency panel from the control console, exposing the raw wiring beneath. His claws sparked against it. The ship trembled. And, against all odds, the engines roared to life. The landing craft lurched into the air, shaking violently as it fought against the pull of the planet. The surviving warriors clung to whatever they could. The ground below rippled, twisting like a living thing, as if the very land itself was reaching for them. But they were already rising. Higher, higher! The smoke cleared, revealing the wreckage-strewn battlefield beneath them. And in the center of it, a shape stared up at them. The thing that had once been the unyielding wrath was no longer just a ship. It was something else now. Something watching. Something smiling. Garen refused to look at it any longer. He locked his gaze on the sky above, on the void, on the hope that if they could just get past the atmosphere. The ship's sensors flickered to life. A transmission crackled through. "This is the battleship Eternal Dominion in high orbit. Overlord Garen, do you copy?" Garen nearly collapsed from relief. "We copy. Immediate retrieval. Do not land." "What happened down there?" the voice on the other end asked. "Our scanners detected no enemy activity, just static." Garen's mandibles clenched. How could he explain? How could he put into words the horror that had unfolded? "Do not attack this planet," he finally said, his voice hollow. "Do not return. Do not send scouts. Do not even look at it." Silence. Then, "Overlord?" Garen closed his eyes. "Burn the records. Mark this world as forbidden, and never speak of it again." The transmission cut. The landing craft broke through the atmosphere, escaping the grip of the planet below. Garen didn't look back. He never wanted to see Earth again. But Earth saw him. And it remembered. It always remembered, because Earth was not weak. Earth was not prey. Earth was something else entirely, and the galaxy would never understand why no one ever returned. Because the ones who did, they were never the same again. Even after escaping Earth's atmosphere, Garen could still feel it. The whispers had stopped, but their echoes lingered in his mind. The darkness of space should have been comforting, a return to the cold, uncaring void he had always known. But something about the stars felt wrong now. He had seen things no warrior should see, and Earth had seen him back. The landing craft drifted into the docking bay of the Eternal Dominion, one of the Zarkari Empire's most powerful warships. The surviving warriors, what little remained of them, stumbled out, their expressions hollow, their bodies trembling. They were the lucky ones. Some had not escaped. Some had changed. And some had simply ceased to be. Garen had been in wars before. He had seen warriors crushed, burned, torn apart. He had never seen an army unmade. The ship's commander, High Warlord Krivak, waited for him at the bay entrance. A towering Zarkari with obsidian-black exoskeleton plating, Krivak was a legend among their kind. He took one look at Garen and frowned. "You look like you crawled out of a grave." Garen's mandibles twitched. "That would have been preferable." Krivak's gaze flicked to the surviving warriors. "This is all that remains of your invasion force?" Garen nodded. "And it was never an invasion. It was an execution." Krivak's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Garen opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How did he describe what had happened? How did he explain that a planet had eaten his army? Instead, he simply said, "We need to leave." "Now?" Krivak folded his arms. "We don't flee from backwater planets. The invasion fleet is still en route. We need to—" "Call them back," Garen snapped, his voice shaking. "Do not let them set foot on that planet. Do not even let them orbit it." Krivak's mandibles twitched in irritation. "You're panicked. That is not the way of a warlord. Garen grabbed him by the armor, his claws digging into the plating. I watched warriors dissolve. I watched our strongest fighters turn into things. I saw our ship become part of the planet itself. You don't understand, Krayvac. We didn't find a defenseless world. We found something waiting for us. Krayvac's patience wavered. His clawed hand shot up, gripping Garen's wrist. Get a hold of yourself. You sound like a mad. A low hum filled the air. Krayvac froze. So did Garen. The sound wasn't coming from the ship's engines. It wasn't from the docking bay machinery. It was coming from inside them. One of the surviving warriors collapsed to his knees, his entire body shaking violently. His mandibles twitched. His eyes, once fierce and golden, turned completely black. And then he laughed. The same distorted, broken laughter that had haunted the comms. The air in the docking bay grew thick. The lights dimmed, not from a malfunction, but from something else. The warriors stepped back, their weapons raised. But Garen already knew they hadn't escaped Earth. Earth had come with them, and it was still hungry. The laughter sent a ripple of cold terror through the Zarkari warriors. It wasn't just coming from the soldier on his knees, it was spreading. The sound layered itself, as if 100 voices whispered beneath it, growing deeper, closer. Then the fallen warrior's body began to change. His exoskeleton cracked, splitting like dried leather. His limbs twitched, elongating slightly, his claws curling unnaturally. His breathing turned ragged, wet. And then he lifted his head. His golden eyes were gone. Only black voids remained. Garen's grip on Krayvac tightened. Do you believe me now? Krayvac was silent. The transformed warrior staggered to his feet, his posture wrong. He looked around the docking bay, tilting his head as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then he smiled. It's still watching. Krayvac drew his plasma rifle and fired. The shot hit the thing square in the chest, burning straight through its armor. It should have fallen. It should have died. But instead it laughed again. The hole in its chest moved, closing over as if the wound had never existed. The creature flexed its claws, looking down at its own body like a child inspecting a new toy. Then it took a step forward. Contain it, Krayvac roared, shoving Garen back and aiming for another shot. The other warriors followed suit, their weapons flaring to life. Plasma bolts slammed into the thing's body, scorching its exoskeleton, but it did not fall. It grew, its form twisted, the black voids in its eyes expanding, spreading outward like cracks in reality itself. And then, the docking bay screamed. Not the warriors, not the creature, the ship itself. The walls groaned, metal warping and breathing. The floor beneath them pulsed. The very air shuddered, rippling like disturbed water. The eternal dominion was changing, becoming something else. You brought it with you, the thing whispered. One of the warriors broke. He turned, sprinting toward the blast doors, toward escape. But before he could reach it, the door melted into flesh and opened an eye. The warrior's scream was cut short as the door swallowed him. Garen's mind reeled. This wasn't possible. They had escaped. They were in orbit, light years away from that cursed planet. But the truth was undeniable. They had never left Earth. Because Earth had never been just a planet. It was something else. And now it was spreading. The creature that had once been a Zarkari warrior let out a slow, satisfied breath. Then it turned its gaze to Garen. You never should have come. Garen felt something inside him crack. This wasn't just an invasion gone wrong. This was an infection. And now it was in their fleet, in their empire, and soon it would be everywhere. Garen had never felt true hopelessness before. He had fought battles where the odds were against him, stood against enemies that outnumbered him 10 to 1, survived wars that had crushed entire civilizations. But this was something else. His claws trembled on the grip of his plasma blade. Not out of fear. He had accepted fear long ago. But because some deep, primal part of him knew. This fight had already been lost. The thing that had once been his warrior took another step forward. Its mandibles stretched in a grotesque mockery of a Zarkari expression, its eyes, those empty voids, fixated on him. And then it spoke. "You think you escaped." The whispers came from inside his mind, crawling beneath his exoskeleton, slithering into every crack of his thoughts. "You brought us with you." Around him, the docking bay breathed. The walls swelled and contracted, the metal groaning as if becoming something organic. The ship was changing, becoming part of it. Krivak, still standing beside him, let out a slow exhale. "Overlord, tell me this is a nightmare." Garen didn't answer, because it wasn't. The transformed Zarkari warrior lunged, faster than he should have been, faster than anything should have been. Garen barely reacted in time. His plasma blade flared to life, swinging upward. The blade cut straight through the thing's torso, splitting it in half. For a fraction of a second, he felt relief. Then it laughed. The severed halves writhed, black tendrils slithering through the air, pulling themselves back together. The wound healed as if it had never been there at all. Krivak snarled. "Fall back, now!" The remaining warriors turned and ran. Not because they were cowards. Zarkari did not retreat. But this was not an enemy they could fight. This was not an enemy at all. This was a plague.